22.430. Then it's Michael Schumacher on the 1-2. Oh, and there's a very big shunt.
And that is indeed, that's at the exit of... looking at it, it's difficult to tell who it is. Upside down, that car, both left-hand wheels, front and rear, are off. And we have to see the car pushed back. It's Rubens Barrichello, the man who's lying currently second in the World Championship. And that is a serious off for Barrichello. The red flag is out. The session has been stopped. And Professor Watkins straight to Rubens Barrichello, who's sitting in his car. He's now being attended. And we have just to wait a moment or two until we can see clearly what the situation is. But this very quick indeed to an incident, a heavy accident like this, heavy impact on the right-hand side of the car, as we see. And the first thing that Professor Watkins does when he gets to a driver, well, it's going through the Marlboro. Oh, yes. Literally, something in that Marlboro chicane went very badly wrong indeed. And it looks to me like something in the left front suspension. And the steering, you can see, maybe that was, and a very, very big impact indeed. High up into the tyre barrier, the advertising signs just above that. So Professor Watkins now in attendance to Rubens Barrichello. The first thing to do is to stabilize any driver in this incident. The helmet is now off. They've got neck collars, and they will take as long as they feel is necessary to ensure the driver's comfort and safety. And then finally, when they're satisfied, they can begin to take Rubens from his car.
While the doctors are working on Rubens Barrichello, getting him out of the car, let's go through the standings at the moment. Ayrton Senna, Michael Schumacher are first and second. Then it's JJ Leto, Nicola Larini is fourth, Heinz-Harald Frentzen fifth, Gianni Morbidelli sixth, Carl Wendlinger seventh, Martin Brundle eighth, and Ukio Katayama is ninth. Then Pierluigi Martini and Eric Bernard, Johnny Herbert 12th, Christian Fittipaldi 13th, Oliver Panis 14th, Mark Blundell 15th, then Pedro Lamy, Bertrand Gachot, Roland Ratzenberger, and Paul Bamondo complete the top 19. And Olivier Beretta has done one single lap in 20th place. And there is 41 minutes left in this session, which will resume after Rubens Barrichello is out of the car. Well, John, a very big impact, and partly because Rubens Barrichello missed the tyre wall altogether. I mean, he just flew straight over the tyre wall. Look, into the fence.
Well, fortunately, there is debris fencing there. That's mandatory around a Grand Prix circuit these days, and that debris fencing did a superb job. It not only retained Barrichello's Jordan within the circuit, it kept all the debris, or the majority of it that we can see, also within the circuit. Here we again see, and it's so quick. I mean, that's a fourth gear, probably fifth gear, almost flat out. 130, 40 miles an hour coming through there. So that debris fencing certainly preventing more serious incidents than what is already a very serious one indeed. This is just the section of circuit. Here again we see Barrichello coming through.
It looks like something broke on that car, John. I mean, it just didn't turn left, did it?
It's, to me, it looked like something on the left front suspension, maybe in the steering. It's difficult to tell. It happens very quickly, and really what you have to watch is the right front wheel to see, because it looks as if there is lock on the left front, but watching the right, you need to see it again and again. But certainly something went dramatically wrong for Rubens coming through that Marlboro chicane, and that was his first. He had just completed, in fact, an out lap, and he was on his first flying lap. So Rubens would have been on it as hard as he could do, and just coming up to the completion of that first full flying lap.
There we see all the marshals being busy getting Rubens out of the car and being very careful with his neck, John.
Just looking at the circuit, I mean, at that point of the circuit, there are curbs. Now, it is that curb that caused the car to fly. Now, curbing is on the side of a track to indicate to the driver that is the limit of the track, because if you don't have curbing there, then the tendency is for drivers to run wider and wider. but what it did do is in effect act as a launch pad for Rubens Barrichello, and he did in fact, as we said, clear the tower wall, and it was only the strength and integrity of that retaining fence behind it which kept the car within the circuit, and that's again testament to the security and safety that is now mandatory at any Grand Prix circuit, or any circuit in fact running an international motor racing event.
So, well, watch it again. Wow, it just didn't turn left.
Well, you can see he's on the brakes. I mean, he realized probably midway through the right-hand part of the Marlborough chicane that there was something going wrong. He then, in a fraction of a second later, knew it was going wrong because it was in real trouble. There you can see the car, massive sideways impact, comes down nose first, both right-hand side are off, rolls over once. Rubens' arm, his right hand off the steering wheel, being flailed around, finishes up upside down. The marshals very quick indeed. You can see already on their way. Luckily, all the debris from the car staying within the circuit. Professor Watkins, who is in the pit lane, ready in a car. The medical centre, unfortunately, again, very close to this point of the circuit.
So now everybody being really careful with Barrichello. They just want to make sure he hasn't got any neck injury. John, there's a program which the doctor does to make sure they can actually move Barrichello.
Well, the principal thing is to make sure the driver is stable before you do anything. Helmet can at times be, in enthusiasm or in concern, be removed too quickly. And that's why people like Professor Watkins are on hand. He is the Formula One, the doctor. Nothing can be done until he arrives. As we saw, Rubens, his helmet was taken off, and so obviously he's lucid, but that support collar is placed on his neck as a precaution. They've got a special seat which is slid inside the driver's seat, and that enables the driver then to be pulled out of the car with support of his entire body and not just pulling out by the straps on a driver's uniform. So the medical team here at Imola working and stabilizing Rubens as he has a drip, which is a normal function, and they're looking into the Jordan garage now. Team members showing great concern.
And this all happened some 19 minutes into the session, just under 19 minutes into the session, when Rubens was on his first flying lap. Well, the doctors, everybody fairly relaxed around Barrichello. There we see the ambulance, which will take him to the medical center and then probably to the hospital, John. Or you think they might go straight to the hospital?
In my view, the first thing that you must do is take a driver to the medical center. It's, again, this thing of stabilization. There's no urgency. If there was urgency, then you would be seeing a great deal more action. And what we're seeing now is actually a very positive thing. Although it seems very long and protracted, the longer these situations are allowed to continue at the side of the circuit, the better the outcome is going to be. And my first option would be to take Barrichello to the medical center, and then they can do a series of checks. These medical centers equally have got to be to a minimum standard. And one of the responsibilities of Professor Watkins is to select the best medical personnel from within this area, Imola, Bologna, and they are on call throughout the weekend, and there are a number of hospitals within the area equally who are on hand and are prepared for any incident. It doesn't have to be a racing incident, as we've seen. It can be just simply somebody in the spectators may slip and break a leg, or anything that can happen.
Barrichello, there we see the neck collar around his neck, and there, John, I think they're very, very careful with necks these days. I mean, John Lazy's not racing here because he's got a crushed vertebrae. JJ Leto's just back from a neck injury, and Well, let's hope Rubens has not got anything.
And remember, there was a test earlier before the season began when, in fact, Eddie Irvine, Ruben Barrichello's teammate, testing at Manicourt, caught a damp part of the circuit on a quick lap, spun off backwards, same thing into a solid wall, and he got a serious whiplash, but no injury to Eddie Irvine in that moment. So necks appear to be right now the most vulnerable part. Previously it was a leg and a driver because the car safety going back 10 or 15 years ago was not to the level it is currently. And the safety cell, the survival cell that the driver is in, is so strong these days that you can have a massive impact and still get yourself out of the car relatively unhurt. Very heavily bruised, of course, but not any serious injury. Well, looking at it again, looking at it and trying to watch in slow motion as Barrichello, something caused him to put left hand down, as it were. The back end came away very quickly indeed. That didn't look, in my view, to be caused by a driver error. That looked to be something mechanical in the car. But until the car is taken back to the garage and examined by the Jordan team, it's pure speculation on our part. But certainly the consequence was Barrichello left the track at very high speed indeed. The curbing on the exit of the corner, here we see it once again. The curbing caused the car to get airborne. And the car, well, it probably just kissed the top of the tire barrier, and that's the depth of 5 or 6 tires. And that probably was in fact what took off the right front corner and then subsequently the right rear corner. But a lot of energy being dissipated in that incident. High-speed accident, car comes to a stop in a very short space.
John, when you're watching there, in that particular chicane, you know the cars are very quick. I mean, they are the quickest cars in the world, and they're going very fast. But maybe it's when it goes wrong you actually realize how quick they're going.
Well, you're literally a passenger. I mean, you're coming into the Marlborough chicane, you've exited out of Rivazza, and the second part of Rivazza, you're in 4th gear, so 4th gear up into 5th. You always feel you want to go flat out through Marlborough, but you're never quite sure you can make it. But you're talking about 150 miles an hour at least.
We're going to take a commercial break here on Eurosport. Ayrton Senna is fastest, and we'll be back shortly.
Eurosport Live.
While Rubens Barrichello's car is being taken off the circuit, we're watching positions 7 through to 12. And 1 to 6 is still Senna, Schumacher, Leto, Lurini and Frentzen. And then Gianni Morbidelli. 13th to 18th is on our screen now. There's a Jordan Mechanics and Ian Phillips trying to cover up the car, and they'll take it back, Chuck, and they'll do a pretty good investigation, I would think.
Well, certainly each part of the car will be taken back. It'll be sent off for analysis. They'll get a proper report on every part of the car that they would consider needing inspection, and really that cover over the cars to stop all the gapers and the ghouls around the place, to put the car back into the transporter. And fortunately this is literally the end of the pit block, so that the car will be very shortly back with the team at the back of the garage, and they will then begin the process of stripping down or stripping off the right side of the car that is heavily damaged. Looking at John Moulton, team manager of the Cecil Jordan Hart team. Eddie Irvine here, who's here, in fact, is a competitor in the Porsche Super Cup race series. This is the first round of that race series, and he's going to be going out to practice a little later in the afternoon. And as usual, pit lane, very busy indeed.
very wide pit lane here in Imola. Also, John, it's one of those circuits where you do not lose an enormous amount of time driving in and out of the pits. So we've been talking about pit stops already, and 2 or 3 pit stops, or definitely 2, maybe 3.
Well, just once again, we're watching this moment so fast, and no chance at all. Barrichello was a passenger from midway through the chicane, and sitting there just waiting for the impact to take place. Not a very pleasant thought for any driver, but it's one that most Grand Prix drivers at some stage regrettably do have to go through. But going back to what you're saying about the circuit and the number of pit stops, it is a very quick entry, it's a very quick exit, and the equation in my mind that teams have got to decide is whether to go with the D compound tyre, which is the softer, the more competitive tyre, and maybe make 3 pit stops against using the C compound tyre and trying to get away with 2 pit stops.
I know what you're going to say, John. But having seen this for now, I think about the 20th time, we are still waiting when the green flag will be out again at 13:40 exact. So that is another 5.5 minutes to go before the restart. And well, Jochen Maas just walked into our commentary booth. Jochen, what a chance.
Yeah, a terrible accident, reasonably predictable over the development of the years. I feel very much that the curbs, the present curbs on many circuits are definitely too high, and they launched the car. We've seen similar accidents. When I think of Warwick's accident in Hockenheim, he was lucky then, but he was also launched very high into the air, and of course this was very much the same. And I feel, we must really work on the safety again and consider all these curb business. I feel this is really ridiculous. I mean, he jumped clear over the tires, so what chance does he have?
Well, I think that what we have seen here this afternoon indicates that as good and high a level that we have in Grand Prix safety or Grand Prix circuits, there's still always room for lessons to be learned. And I think the key to this is learning the lesson before somebody gets hurt. And undoubtedly, with the kind of curves that we have at Imola, they're not as steep or severe as many other circuits, but that curving on the exit of a corner as opposed to what you have on the entry to a corner undoubtedly contributed to the spectacular aspect of that accident. Had that curbing not been there, the car would have just plowed into the tyre wall. We don't know whether the damage would have been any less or greater. It's one of those things you never do know. You just, as a circuit, you've got to do what you feel is within the current knowledge and safety right, as well as the minimum standards that are required, and those minimum standards are extremely high. Now, the question of curbing is always a problem, because if you don't have curbs, as I said earlier, drivers take advantage of that and they will drive over parts of the circuit. They will shortcut parts of the circuit. So curbing is there for a very good reason, but it can, of course, lead to secondary problems, and certainly for Barrichello it created a major problem.
Yeah, absolutely right, John, but I still feel also the runoff area and a reasonably fast entry like this one, the runoff area and the safety margin you have on the outside is not big enough. And I feel really, we've been so finicky with many circuits in the past that we really must apply it properly everywhere. And, knowing the speed of the cars now and the safety of the chassis, we can't just rest on that. We really have to do a bit more.
Well, I think that's one of the problems that, particularly in the last 2 or 3 years, we've seen cornering speeds yet again rise to such high levels. And, I mean, going back to 10 or 12 years ago, coming through that Marlborough chicane with a lot less horsepower, it was a real art to try and get through there, just breathing the throttle. With a lot more horsepower, you're getting there a lot quicker. With a lot more downforce, you might just be at a similar level, but probably going 20 miles an hour quicker. When you're in control, and these current Formula One cars are fantastic when they're in control, because they just have got levels of grip and handling beyond anybody's dreams. But when something does go wrong, the time you have to recover or react, let alone to recover, is minimal. And the predictability or the messages that you get when something's about to go wrong are just so short that you've got no chance. You're just a passenger. and your fate really lies within the integrity of a corner or a given circuit. Well, this session is due to start probably in a little over 2 minutes. We're waiting for the flag to be shown at 13:40. So qualifying can recommence. Currently quickest Ayrton Senna, 1 minute 22.430. Just over a tenth of a second behind Michael Schumacher. And JJ Leto in his first Grand Prix of 94. And a welcome back indeed to JJ. He's been anxiously waiting for the moment in which he could get his hands on the first competitive Grand Prix car in his career, and certainly justifying the team's faith in him, and an amazing recovery from a very severe incident back in early season testing when he went backwards into a wall, chipped 2 vertebrae in his neck. He had an operation in which there's a bone graft from his hip into the neck, and he has been training so hard over the past 3 months to get fit. He's been swimming, running, bicycling, press-ups, skipping, whatever it is he can do to get himself fit, he's been doing it.
Well, John, the latest from the medical center is that Rubens Barrichello is not unconscious. He's talking to the doctors, so that part seems to be okay. And he is able to move his body parts.
Well, I think that confirms what we were watching while Rubens was being taken from his car and then stabilized by the side of the car. In my mind, when you see those situations, I'm not too worried, because I feel that the driver's situation is very good indeed. If there's a lot more urgency, then you might think there's a problem. So hopefully Rubens will be up and about. He certainly is going to be very stiff. And as ever, the neck gets a fairly major whiplash. But, you know, racing drivers are tough. And the best cure for a severe bang like that is to get back into the car as soon as you can. Adrenaline is the best anesthetic you can have. So we'll wait and see what happens on Saturday afternoon.
13:40. It should be restarted now. It's not restarted yet, so maybe we get... Yes, it is restarted. So the session recommencing.
Once again, we're watching it now. They've brought it in tighter, and we try to see. It's very difficult, because you see the front wheels doing one thing, but you're not quite sure, has the problem come from the front or come from the back. And you see the incident as Barrichello rolls over and finally comes to an end. Suspension wheels